Hi and welcome everyone. As I mentioned, I'm Jill Smedstad, Executive Director with Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District. Thank you for joining us today. I've been helping to co-convene a small kind of group of folks, the Inland Road Water Resiliency Group, that have been looking at different opportunities for planning for kind of a resilient water future for the region, together with Craig Harper from the Rogue River Watershed Council, and several others. We convened in September the Rogue Water Forum, which had over 100 folks from across the region and different water interests get together and share experiences around water in the region. And these webinars is then kind of a next step in from that water forum of continuing that conversation, and as an opportunity for folks from different sectors in the water in the Inland Rogue to share about their experiences and to share about what's going on in their world. And so this is the third of our water webinar series. This is on drought and water availability conditions in the Inland Rogue. We have several presenters today sharing about that. We've had two others before that, and then we're going to have several more throughout the year. So I'm thankful for folks that could attend today, and we'll be sharing out this recording afterwards as well, so that people that weren't able to attend could also listen in. We're going to have several presenters: Shavon Haynes with the Oregon Water Resources Department, Cameron Greenwood also with the Oregon Water Resources Department, and Delaney Richmond with Jackson County. So they will be introducing each other to give a little bit more background. I'm going to turn it over to Sue for a little bit of housekeeping. Sue Parrish with OWRD before we get started.
Thanks, Jill. Hi, all. As Jill mentioned, my name is Sue Parrish. I'm a Community Engagement Coordinator with the Water Resources Department. I live just outside of Grants Pass. So glad to be here with you all today. I was just looking in the chat about all the people introducing themselves. A lot of people coming to learn about the current conditions or where to find information, interested in how we manage drought. You are in the right place. So thanks for sharing all that today. I encourage you all to look in the chat and see who else is there that has joined today. One thing that I would add from what Jill said is that we have the Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District is actually hosting these webinars on their on a web page, and I'm going to put that in the chat for you all. There's two already up because we've done two. And then we'll be posting more as they happen. I'm sorry, I'm apparently not as good at dropping links in there. Okay, a couple little short things, and then I'm going to introduce Cameron and we'll get started. We're going to have, as Jill mentioned, 3 different presentations, and after each one, we'll have a short window for questions that are specific to that presentation, and then we'll have some time for broader discussion at the end. If you could put your questions in the chat, that'd be helpful. We ask you to do that so we can combine similar questions to get to as many as possible. And also, if you like someone's question, like it, because if 7 people like that question, we're going to ask it first. So, and then if you feel like you can't get your question answered by putting it in the chat, feel free to raise your hand, but we would ask you to be aware of your speaking time so others can ask questions as well. Any questions before we get started today? Okay. Then I'm going to be the first to introduce a speaker. Cameron Greenwood is a hydrologist with the Oregon Water Resources Department. Thank you, Cameron, for coming and joining us today. He is the chair of the Water Supply Availability Committee, which is a group of natural resource subject matter experts that monitor drought conditions in Oregon. And he also co-chairs, along with Curtis Peetz, who's graciously joined us today for a little while he's free. Curtis works for the Oregon Office of Emergency Management, and they both co-chair the Drought Readiness Council, which is a group of representatives from natural resource and emergency management agencies that evaluate state drought declaration requests. So with that, Cameron, I will pass it off to you. If you might share your screen, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. Just want to verify that you can see my shared screen.
Sure can.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, good morning, everyone. Appreciate you having me here today. I wish it were under better circumstances, considering drought conditions that we will be discussing today, in addition to the drought declaration processes and support that both ORS 401 and 536 can offer. I did also just want to note that I am in support by Curtis Peetz today. He is joining us from the Oregon Department of Emergency Management, and we'll go ahead and get things going. So starting off with a look at drought conditions. So we'll start off by looking at the U.S. Drought Monitor. If you are unfamiliar with the U.S. Drought Monitor, it's a collaboration between the National Drought Mitigation Center, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And they produce maps that are released every Thursday that depict drought using 6 different intensity classifications. On the bottom, we have a time series that shows what % of Oregon was in each of these U.S. Drought Monitor categories going back to 2014. And as we can see, Oregon has had quite the history of drought in the past, give or take 10 years, with several multi-year drought cycles of varying intensities. More recently, as of June 23rd, 86% of the state is in some form of drought, ranging from moderate drought in tan to extreme drought in red, with 54% of the state in severe or extreme drought, and severe drought is the area in orange. So the current depiction of drought on the U.S. Drought Monitor has largely been driven by above normal temperatures and long-term precipitation deficits, which include well below normal snowpack conditions. So you may have heard and be well aware that this year's snowpack conditions have been very poor, as is shown on this time series here, which is from the NRCS SNOWTEL Monitoring Network, which is a series of high elevation snow monitoring sites across the U.S. West. So this is showing snowpack conditions as snow water equivalent, or what is commonly referred to as SWE, which is a good indicator of how much water is in the snow. I will point out that in addition to the current water year in black, this time series is also showing the water year snowpack from 2015 in blue. Apologies, I lost my place in my notes. So the snow drought conditions that were present this year were very similar to 2015 and were largely driven by above normal temperatures. So considering these similarities, it's a good analog year for us to get an idea of how conditions could develop over the summer. This map right here is again from the U.S. Drought Monitor, and it's showing drought conditions in Oregon at the end of the water year 2015. Such that by the end of water year 2015, 67% of Oregon was in extreme drought, shown in red, with the rest of the state in severe drought, in orange. Drought development over this water year was largely driven by that well below normal snowpack. So continuing with the example from 2015 as a sort of proxy for what we might anticipate for this year, this map here is showing state drought declarations under ORS 536 for the calendar year 2015. And by the end of calendar year 2015, 25 of Oregon's 36 counties had received state drought declarations, with again a lack of snow being the primary contributor to drought development that year. Now taking a look at the current state of things with respect to ORS 536 drought declarations, this is showing that so far 19 counties have received state drought declarations, including Coos, Douglas, Josephine, and Jackson, with Curry and Union counties currently under evaluation. I will note that this year the Burns Paiute tribe did submit a request for a declaration in Lake Harney, Malheur, and Grant counties. Now taking a look at precipitation and temperature conditions for the period of October through May. On the left, we have precipitation conditions as a percent of normal, and on the right, temperature conditions as a departure from normal. So on the left, we can see that for much of the state, especially across Western Oregon, precipitation over the water year has been below normal, and throughout other parts of the state, such as in parts of central, eastern, and southeastern Oregon, precipitation has also been below normal. Through this period, the state received about 82% of its normal precipitation. So not terribly bad, but still below normal. And again, on the right, we're looking at temperature conditions as a departure of normal, where we can see that for most of the state over this period, temperatures have been above normal. Taking a closer look at temperature conditions for the winter, so December through February, this map is showing the county average temperature rankings over the last 131 years, where anything marked 131st, so that's Morrow, Deschutes, and Lake counties recorded their warmest winter on record. Anything marked 130th recorded their second warmest winter on record, and anything marked 129th recorded their third warmest winter on record. So statewide, this past winter was tied with 2015 for the second warmest winter on record, with a statewide average departure from normal of 6.6 degrees above normal. And so this is pretty remarkable, really indicates that above normal temperatures were the primary driver of that lack of snowpack. Now taking a look at precipitation conditions, but just for the month of January, which was ranked as the fifth lowest or fifth driest January on record, which is important to note because January is typically one of the wetter months of the year. And so this is typically when we anticipate some pretty significant precipitation and snowpack accumulation that we did not receive. I do want to note that December and February precipitation were normal to above normal, and so this mixture of precipitation conditions speaks to the impact that those above normal temperatures had over the winter on snowpack accumulation this winter, being an indicator that this year's snow drought was what is generally referred to as a warm snow drought, where it's the above normal temperatures that are the primary driver of a lack of snowpack, not necessarily a lack of precipitation. So now looking at stream flow conditions, this is a statewide picture of water year-to-date percent of average stream flow through June 24th, where we can see that majority of the state has recorded below to well below normal stream flow conditions. And we'll take a closer look at southwestern Oregon here, where we can see that the Rogue Basin is at 57% of normal with respect to total water year volumes at this point. And surrounding basins are also in very similar territory. So now taking a quick hydrograph tour at some select gauges. This is the South Fork of Rogue near Prospect, shown on the map here in the circle. This is one of the few gauges in the area that has fared well over the water year. It started off the water year pretty strong. I will point out that 2026 is in black and 2015 is in the dashed blue line. There again showing how these years compare, considering the primary driver of drought development in 2015 was the lack of snowpack. So as we can see, as I mentioned, this year, the water year started off strong at this gauge. But as we have approached the point of the year where we typically see an influx or an increase in stream flow due to snow melt, we're seeing stream flows decline and getting closer to what we saw in 2015. Now taking a look at Rogue River below Prospect, I believe this is still above Lost Creek Reservoir, where we can see that currently and throughout most of the water year, stream flow conditions have been well below normal. Moving further down in the basin, this is for Big Butte Creek. And again, similar story to the last hydrograph, stream flow conditions have largely been below to well below normal. And lastly, looking at Sucker Creek, again, very similar story as to the last, with the exception of some peaks from atmospheric river events. Stream flow conditions over the water year have largely been below normal. Now, quickly taking a look at some reservoir conditions. These are teacup diagrams from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. reservoir projects in the area, where Lost Creek Reservoir is, as of yesterday, at 55% of its capacity, with at 45% below the rule curve. So that's the target reservoir elevation or storage level that reservoir operators try to maintain. And Applegate Reservoir is at 44% full and 56% below the rule curve. So now taking a look ahead for June through September, so for the rest of summer, few maps here to dive into. So we'll start with the ones on the right. The two smaller maps are maps from the Climate Prediction Center, the top being the seasonal temperature outlook and the bottom being the seasonal precipitation outlook. For this period of summer, we're looking at a strong chance of above normal temperatures. I believe it's 60 to 70%, if I can see that small legend right, for the entire state, denoted by that darker red color. And for precipitation, it's a bit mixed, or rather uncertain, I should say, excluding a part of northwestern Oregon, where the entire state in white has equal chances of below normal, normal, or above normal precipitation. So with these outlooks in mind, the U.S. Drought Monitor produces seasonal drought outlooks for the same period. That's the larger map here, where we can see for areas in yellow in Oregon, drought is likely to develop, and areas in brown, drought is likely to persist. So shifting gears a bit here, this is when Curtis and I will be discussing both the 536 and 401 declaration authorities, their processes, and the support that they offer individually. So Oregon has two primary drought declaration authorities, ORS 536, which is focused specifically on water supply shortages and provides flexibility within Oregon's water law framework, whereas a 401 is part of the state's broader emergency management statute and applies when drought impacts rise to the level of public health, infrastructure, or economic emergency. They serve different purposes and provide different types of support. So starting off by looking at a 536, a severe and continuing drought. Again, it's a drought-specific water management statute designed to respond directly to water supply shortages, provides targeted regulatory flexibility, and is not a broad emergency response. The resources that are enabled by a 536 are water-focused and operational, and these are emergency water rights tools that are shown in the table on the right and include temporary drought permits, temporary transfers or substitutions, temporary exchanges of water, temporary in-stream leases, special options agreements, and a preference for human consumption or stock water. Declarations are time-limited, expiring at the end of the calendar year, and which enforces that a 536 is intended to be a temporary targeted response to drought-driven water supply constraints. The drought declaration process under a 536 is supported by two interagency groups, the Water Supply Availability Committee and the Drought Readiness Council. So taking a quick look at these groups, starting off with the Water Supply Availability Committee, they serve as the technical backbone of the drought declaration process. This committee evaluates water supply and drought conditions using multiple indicators such as snowpack, stream flow, soil moisture, climate conditions and forecasts, reservoir storage, and other drought-specific metrics. The role of the Water Supply Availability Committee is to provide consistent, objective assessments of water supply conditions that inform the evaluation process of the Drought Readiness Council. Members of the Water Supply Availability Committee are technical natural resource subject matter experts from state and federal agencies and are listed on the right. So the second group that supports this process is the Drought Readiness Council, which is an interagency advisory and coordination body. So using the technical assessments from the Water Supply Availability Committee, the Drought Readiness Council evaluates drought impacts across sectors, reviews local requests for assistance, and places technical conditions into a broader coordination and impact context. Their role is advisory and culminates in the recommendation to the governor's office regarding a drought declaration. It's important to note that the authority to declare a drought resides with the governor. The Drought Readiness Council advises the governor. They make recommendations to the governor whether they are in support of this request or not. Again, members of the DRC are listed on the right, and the representatives are from state agencies responsible for natural resource and emergency management. So this flowchart here hopefully helps visualize and summarize the life cycle of a drought declaration process. So pursuant to a 536, a tribe or county in Oregon will declare a drought emergency at the local level. They then submit a drought declaration request to the governor through the Drought Readiness Council. Again, the Drought Readiness Council is a coordinating body of state agencies responsible for reviewing local requests for assistance and making recommendations to the governor's office regarding the need for a state drought declaration. The Drought Readiness Council then evaluates the request with support from the Water Supply Availability Committee. Again, they are the technical committee that is responsible for providing updates on current water supply and drought conditions. With this information, the Drought Readiness Council determines if a severe and continuing drought is likely. If so, the Drought Readiness Council recommends the request for approval to the governor's office, and if approved, the governor issues a state drought declaration by executive order. The Water Supply Availability Committee essentially answers what is happening with water supply conditions, and the Drought Readiness Council answers what that means for communities and systems. With an outcome being a coordinated recommendation to the governor's office, the authority, and again, it's important to point out that the authority resides with the governor. The DRC, or Drought Readiness Council, is responsible for making a recommendation. And at this point, I'll pass it off to Curtis.
Great. Thank you, Cameron, and good morning. As Cameron stated, my name is Curtis Peetz, and I'm an operational planner with the Oregon Department of Emergency Management. So, ORS 401, or a state of emergency declaration. As was shared, a declaration of a state of emergency is not limited specifically to water supply conditions. It's really based on emergency impacts and impacts to life, safety, or the other items that were discussed. So why declare a state of emergency under 401? This statute actually provides authorities both to the local jurisdictions as well as to the governor. So for our local jurisdictions, it allows them to declare a state of emergency so that way they can utilize their emergency authorities as identified and defined by their local ordinances to address immediate needs. So when a state of emergency is declared locally, that then allows the local jurisdiction to potentially waive specific rules or be able to expedite providing emergency assistance. For the governor, when the governor declares a state of emergency under a 401 declaration, what this provides is it allows the governor to have some very broad emergency authorities. These authorities include being able to direct state agencies to utilize state resources to respond to the emergency. It allows the governor to also to waive specific or certain rules related to that may be impeding the ability of that emergency response to occur. What's important to highlight and reinforce, though, is that a 401 declaration does not lead to providing financial assistance. This is really a declaration that allows for interagency coordination and to ensure that the resources of the state can be utilized to be able to respond to an emergency. In some situations, it is utilized to request federal assistance, but in our experience, federal assistance related to drought is very limited and really focused on those resources being provided by the United States Department of Agriculture. So in terms of requesting a declaration under 401, the process is that when there is a state of emergency declared at the local level, that information is then shared with the Oregon Department of Emergency Management, and we ask for that jurisdiction to provide us with information about what is the specific needs and the impacts related to that emergency, and really focusing in on the impacts to lives, public health, safety, and property. Using that information, we are then looking at and trying to then identify how is that emergency impacting the communities, and what are the potential resources that the state may need to organize and coordinate to respond to that emergency. Based on the information shared with us, the Department of Emergency Management then makes that recommendation to the governor's office to declare a state of emergency in order to unlock those tools and capabilities that I previously mentioned. On OEM's website, we also do have an emergency declaration guidelines for elected and appointed officials. This is a resource for those individuals to utilize and help them understand the different resources that are available when a state of emergency or when a declaration is issued. We'll go ahead and go on to the next slide, please. Excuse me. So several years ago, we had, as we were experiencing some severe drought impacts, the Department of Emergency Management, working with several other state agencies, including the Water Resources Department, the Oregon Health Authority, Department of Human Services, and other natural resource organizations, came together and really tried to identify how could we help develop a planning resource for jurisdictions to prepare for drought. From that work, we developed what's referred to as the Local Water Supply Emergency Planning Guide. And this guide is something that I did share with Sue to be able to be sharing out with everyone in this group. This guide is a public guide, and what it's intended to do is really provide some tools and recommendations to help jurisdictions prepare for drought emergencies. Several of the steps that are included in that guide include: one, identifying what are the existing plans and understanding what those impacts are for droughts and how it may impact your communities before it occurs. And so we encourage the jurisdictions to, one, work very closely with the county emergency manager, which I'm very excited that we have one on this morning, to really understand, what are the impacts, to identify the capability, so what resources are available locally to be able to respond to those drought-related impacts, and then most importantly, in some cases, is then to make sure there's a good and solid communications plan. We recognize that during emergencies, communications is critical, so that way individuals understand what are the specific actions they should be taking. Two, we would encourage that if there isn't already an existing planning team related to drought, that one be formed. As part of this planning team, we do encourage that there be representatives from the whole community, as well as representatives from water districts, individuals that utilize that water, so maybe individuals that represent the underserved, as well as local businesses and other critical water users. The reason for having this team is so that way that team can come together and discuss those specific impacts, identify how that team wants to coordinate and respond locally to support that drought emergency, and to be able to best represent and support the community. And lastly, part of that work of working with that group is to start identifying what are some specific technical assistance or resources that may be needed. And so this year, the Oregon Water Resources Department and the Department of Emergency Management have been working very closely together. We have developed some public information materials related to water conservation. So that is one tool that has been put together this year. But if there's other types of technical assistance that may be necessary, we would then ask that information be shared, so that way the Department of Emergency Management or other agencies then could help provide and really coordinate assistance to be able to address those unmet needs. So that pre-planning is very important. And with that, I'll hand it back to you, Cameron.
Thanks, Curtis. So for local and tribal governments, a drought declaration provides structure and support. Under a 536, water management flexibility can help address shortages, whereas under a 401, broader coordination and potential access to emergency resources may become available. Declarations do not automatically provide funding, and they do not replace the responsibility of local preparedness and response. It's important to note that declarations do not result in eligibility for federal assistance. Federal assistance programs have separate eligibility criteria that don't involve state drought declarations. And with that, we'd be happy to take any questions should you have them. We'll go ahead and with that, we will go ahead and move on to Shavon, who is the District 13 Watermaster in Oregon. And yeah, very interested to hear what he has to present on.
And for those of you who are wondering, District 13 is Jackson County, although I know most of you know Shavon.
Yeah. Let's see. All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
And hear me okay? All right. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Yeah, my name is Shavon Haynes. I'm the District 13 Watermaster with the Oregon Water Resources Department. And today I'm just going to kind of share with you some of the water right resources that are available as a result of the 536. Much of that Cameron already went over, as well as where to find some water information on like streams and wells, websites that I often refer to when I'm trying to find that information. So as Cameron had mentioned, the one second. Yeah, the Oregon Water Resource Department does have a drought information page, which Cameron shared the link to. This page offers an up-to-date insights on tools to help Oregonians respond to drought conditions. It has current conditions and overview, detailed access to detailed updates on snow level packs, stream flows, soil moisture, has links to the drought declaration status, so you can see other counties and areas that have also requested a drought declaration. You can get the weekly water supply reports and the bi-weekly bulletin, and you can sign up for that notification if folks are interested through this site. And it has some links to some conservation resources on, how folks can use water wisely, advice and tips for household management, agriculture, and communities. So the majority of the stuff that, I usually help folks with is kind of walking them and introducing them to the tools that are the water right drought tools. And some of these tools and these water right processes, such as the temporary water use permit, if approved, it allows a water user to temporarily replace water that is not normally available under an existing permit. The most common of these is, like Cameron had mentioned before, is like if you have a surface water right and that water isn't available, you could potentially be able to use a well to make up any deficiency in that surface water appropriation. But once again, it is subject to a review process, and these processes, it is reviewed through an expedited process. So generally, these are estimated to take about 10 days. We have seen a handful of these in the Rogue Basin already this year. Smaller requests, maybe 3 to 5 acres. However, they were taking about what they recommended about 10 days to process, which is pretty quick for the Water Resource Department to transfer to process applications. Also, there's temporary water right transfers where folks can apply once again through an expedited process. They can change like the place of use of the water rights. They can change like the type of use, the location of where the water right is, and the location of the water diversion or the place where water is taken out of a creek or a stream. Where I see a lot of these is, if we're doing a regulation where we're having to curtail water use, many folks will have multiple water rights on their property, and they can kind of flip-flop priority dates on different areas. So if they know they want to irrigate one specific spot, but it might have a junior water right, they might, flip-flop their water rights to put the more senior water right on a crop that might be more susceptible to the drought. There's some temporary water substitutions where this process is if someone has a secondary water right, which we consider a supplemental water right, they're not allowed to use that water right until their primary is totally depleted. This process will allow somebody to switch to their supplemental right if it's being impacted by a drought. And temporary water exchange, which is very similar to the substitution. There's some other tools that kind of take, more advanced planning to adopt. There can be some special agreements that can be made. So once in place, these special agreements can be utilized to help mitigate some water needs through a drought. These options where, a water right holder can enter into an agreement that authorizes the use of water at different locations, maybe different points of diversion, so on and so forth. But that tool really does require some pre-planning and consultation with the Watermaster, and then a proposal to the agency. I haven't seen these being utilized very often, but it is a tool that is available for folks. And the preference for human consumption and stock water preference. Counties during their drought declaration can request a human consumption or stock water preference. Generally, what that entails is that during a regulation process, those uses will not be curtailed as the same manner as they would in the past when we're dealing with irrigation or other out-of-stream or in-stream water use regulation processes. So the Oregon Water Resource Department is kind of the houser, or not the houser, I guess the placeholder for all of the stream flow data within the state of Oregon. I put a link in here to our stream gauging page, as well as a little QR code. And so you can go to this page and look up pretty much any stream gauge throughout the entire state. The department itself has 250 stream gauges that we operate that are on either reservoirs, canals, or even live stream flow. There's also stream flow data on the site from the USGS, the Army Corps of Engineers, the Bureau of Reclamation, as well as irrigation districts, and also some non-governmental entities. So it's a really good place to go to find, any stream flow data that's being collected throughout the state. You can also look at kind of historic data as well as instantaneous data. So we can compare different years data to see, how are we doing this year as compared to previous years. Very similar to the slide that Cameron had shared in the past. We also have a bunch of groundwater data. So this is the groundwater mapping tool. It's called acronym is GWIS. It's an interactive system that lets users explore well and subsurface geological data across Oregon. It provides access to groundwater levels, lithology, well construction details, and some water right information. And users can search by either like a well ID, or if you don't know that, by location. It's a very useful tool. I won't go too much into that because I believe the next webinar is one of our groundwater folks is going to discuss a lot of this information in greater detail. And so this is just a little hydrograph of some of the data that can be found on that site. This is a really neat well over by Immigrant Lake, where you can see over time we had some declines and recharge. So I just like this graph because it really shows that some of these well systems are pretty dynamic. The NRCS water data map is another one I use a lot. This map has information from automated snowtail sites, as well as some reservoir level information and stream flow information. So all of the blue sites here, the really dark blue, those are the snowtail sites that collect snow depth, density, and what Cameron was talking about earlier, the SWE, which is the snow water equivalent. And the light blue sites are manual measurement locations where staff and/or volunteers of the NRCS go out and make monthly measurements, generally from January through May of every year. There's 4 sites up on Mount Ashland that actually my office we get to participate in. So that's a good place to find some information as well. And so this is the same graph that Cameron shared earlier, except for this one is just showing the snow water equivalent just in southern Oregon. As you can see, the black line is what our current level is, and it's looking like it's pretty close to some of the worst information on record. And so and that kind of concludes my presentation. Here is all of the links to some of the sites that I had mentioned. I'll also drop links to all of these in the chat for folks to use. And with that, I guess we'll take some questions. So Delaney. So next up is Delaney Richmond. She is the Jackson County Emergency Manager. She's responsible for leading the county's emergency management program, which oversees mitigation, preparedness, planning, coordination of response, and recovery of activities for all hazard disasters, including natural disasters, acts of terrorism, which I hope we never experience, and other man-made emergencies. So without further delay, you're up, Delaney.
Dang, that was really lengthy. We didn't even practice that, Shavon. I love that intro. You need to introduce me more often. So good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Sound check, you guys can hear me. Shavon laughed, but yeah, good, cool. I am so excited to see people that I recognize on the call, but also there's a lot of people that I don't recognize. So let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Cool. Okay. So for those who don't know me, I am your friendly neighborhood emergency manager in Jackson County, Delaney Richmond. I have been in this position a little over a year now. And like I said, there's a lot of people that I know. There's a lot of people that I don't know. So I'm really excited to follow up and receive some contacts or maybe emails from people post this. So today I'm going to be doing a quick run through. I know we were trying to keep this at an hour of the county perspective of a drought declaration. So my title slide, I was asked earlier who these wonderful beings are, and this is my wonderful husband John and my 5-month-old Jack Russell puppy Sam, and this is our gorgeous raft that we recently took down the Wild and Scenic this last May. So we are avid rafters, so water flow is very near and dear to my heart, along with all the ramifications that come with, like, you know, really bony water and all that stuff. So that's my family. So based upon prior discussions of this call specifically, I think it's really important to distinguish that normal declarations from the county's perspective basically are necessary when we run out of resources like people and things to prevent a problem or stop a problem from happening, and we need more help. So the counties and additionally cities are supposed to declare an emergency when they've tried to stop a problem or fix a problem, and we can't do it by ourselves. That's like the 50,000 foot level of what this is. Drought emergencies are very interesting because they're often slow moving, they're multi-year, and they tend to compound, which is what we're seeing this year's accumulation of many years and of being in some really weird statistics with water, right? So drought declarations, the reason why we say ORS 536 is because the county does not have authority to do the, emergency tools that OWRD do. So we have to declare under 536 in order to have the governor then declare and activate the Oregon Water Resources Division in order to receive those emergency water toolkits, right? Like Curtis, awesome job describing 401. We understand that because there's a drought, it's not just this one state agency that can provide assistance. There's going to be additional impacts that don't fall underneath OWRD. There's going to be issues with people, life safety, critical infrastructure, and all that stuff. So hopefully my presentation, I'm speaking directly towards the 536 model right now, but just know that when counties declare, usually it's because we can't do a thing without help. And so drought declarations, when you see these terms, that's what that means. So a county declaration, what is the actual process? So what it does, it officially recognizes to the state governor's office that Jackson County has an issue with water supply. It enables the county to request a governor's drought declaration. Like I just said, it unlocks all the resources with the Oregon Water Resources Division. It unlocks additional resources through additional coordination through like Oregon Health Authority, Oregon Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Resiliency and Emergency Management, and a whole bunch of other letter soup agencies from the state, right? I will also say that Jackson County does a pretty extraordinary job communicating and coordinating with all of our partner agencies, both local, state, and federal. I think it's because we're so far from Salem that we all like get together and we're all under one roof down here, but we do a really awesome job on a blue sky day when nothing's happening. For working with our partners locally. So when we have an emergency, it's not the first time that we're talking. So Shavon and I are really tight. So just know that we're talking about this in the off season as well. So the declaration process. So basically Shavon comes to me and says, hey, we're going to be declaring a drought based upon these water conditions. I work with him and then our council's office to identify if there's any specifics that we need to include within the county drought declaration to call out. Like last year, we had a water right call for water on 4 Mile. I think this year there's the same thing. So anything specific to the county that OWRD is recognizing, we try to include within the declaration. Also, we'll throw in a few other things that we're witnessing that could potentially be impacting municipal water supply, both to human consumption and livestock consumption, which we may have this year within Jackson County, some impacts later on in the summer. So we're just trying to get ahead of things that we know are going to happen within one drought declaration, which then by the Board of Commissioners approving it, allows me to start this coordination with additional partners and other state agencies as well. So once the Board of Commissioners adopts it, we submit a formal letter with the drought declaration to Oregon Emergency Management. They submit that to the governor's office, and that's how the governor's office evaluates each county's deck. So I think we were lumped in with a few other counties, but that's why you'll see not just a statewide drought declaration, it'll be per county. So recently, you might have seen that she declared like imminent wildfire threat, and that's statewide. Drought is definitely per county. Some additional coordination that we do at the county level, I have a list of amazing partners, like I said, that I work with every day and have lunch with, right? But the key here is understanding that it's not just Oregon Water Resources Division that has potential resources. It is a community-led true response. I will say that I lean harder on the Rogue Valley community organizations active in disaster more so than anybody else, because these are organizations that have a bead on what the community issues are, and it's a way to receive feedback as an emergency manager of what the current conditions truly are on boots on the ground. We also work very closely with utilities. So Pacific Power is somebody that we also really work closely with to relay these conditions, because when we start seeing curtailments for irrigation, that increases fire risk to properties, right? So if we can map out who has reduced their water supply, then we can understand that that fuel load and that burn rate could potentially go up, and if a fire should start in that area, it could be more severe than other years and it could really run fast. So again, it's all about the coordination of information. And these are just, like I said, a few of my partners. I saw Medford Water Commission on here. So hi, Julie and Arlo. It's super cool to see you guys on. So when it comes to response, this is where it gets kind of interesting. So Oregon Water Resources Division is doing their thing with the temporary water permits and all that stuff. And Shavon and I coordinate really closely on that. But we also, like I said, understand that it's not just Oregon Water Resources Division. It's not their job for the public health aspect of it or the critical infrastructure water supply aspect of it. I will say that by having this regional drought task force that we are just starting, we had kind of a lukewarm one for a while, but honestly, I've expanded it quite a bit over the last few weeks because we have had water emergencies in Jackson County. And by understanding that when people's water supplies become really limited during fire season or extreme heat, it turns into a public health emergency very fast. So we have a planning commission very much structured like the state of Utah, honestly, where we have a consistent meeting where people can bring in unmet needs from the community or just feedback that they're receiving from their city. So that way we have a better idea of what's going on within the county, especially in our rural communities. This slide here, I have a bunch of QR codes for resources. Like I said, a lot of different agencies own different parts of a drought. So the USDA focuses on like agricultural irrigation loans for farmers and ranchers. Oregon Department of Agriculture has stuff for livestock. A lot of the stuff depends upon whether or not a county is in severe drought, I believe, when they unlock all these resources for them. I have Medford Water Commission on here. They have a great page on current water conditions and what people can be doing. Oregon Water Resources Division, RV COAD, the community businesses active in disaster, and all those guys. My own QR code to my website, so it's readyjackson.gov. We have tips on what homeowners or private citizens can do to reduce their water usage or something. I will say along that note, part of the big problem we're trying to solve right now with this task force for drought is how do we unify public messaging? Because during fire season, we have several different organizations saying, okay, keep your grass short, keep it green, water your lawn, make sure nothing is burnable, because when it dies, it's dead and it's highly flammable, right? Well, during water curtailments or water supply shortages, we're telling them to conserve. So how do we unify those messages and make sure that all the organizations within Jackson County understand the different priorities that we have going on and can unify with the message so that way the public's not confused? I do have SAM HSA on here because I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Sportsman's Warehouse incident that happened earlier this week. But I just have a few stats that I want to tell you about. And with Shavon saying that some farmers are choosing not to farm or to farm, smaller crops, it's really important to be said that the farmer's suicide rate is 3 to 3.5% higher than the general population rate. And in Jackson County, we are 35% higher than the state average. So understanding that, everyone has something going on in their life. We need to be supportive and understanding. And it's often those who seem to be the strongest that are really battling something. It's very important to get those mental health resources out there. And I'll also add that it's been really hard to see the rural areas in Jackson County that are significantly impacted by water supply shortages. They're often the ones that have like the family farms that go under. If they choose not to farm, that's economically stressing them. It also decreases the economic stability of our county as a whole. So love one another. If you hear of someone having a hard time, there's also the mental health crisis hotline, the 988 number. Like I said, this is really impacting different parts of our community in different ways. So it's just important to make sure that we're communicating, understanding how we can strengthen our community as a whole and provide the resources that people need into places where we don't have another incident where someone goes in and feels like they need to take their life. I don't mean to end on a somber note like that, but I'm happy to take any questions that you guys have on the county declaration process or emergency management program as a whole.
Thank you very, very much, Delaney. That was incredibly helpful information. I ended up putting a couple questions in the chat, but I want to open it up first to other folks. Okay. So if people are hearing about someone experiencing an emergency and needing help, who do they contact? Do they contact based on the various resources you showed on that last slide, or is there like a kind of go-to number, or how does that work? I
am always happy to be the hub of the wheel, right? If you have somebody who's experiencing something, my job is to make sure that I connect people with resources and restore systems as fast as possible. So depending upon if it's a mental health emergency, I can kick them off to Health and Human Services. Like I said, if it's a mental health emergency, there is the crisis hotline. You don't have to have the person call. You can call on that person's behalf and they'll follow up with them. If it's somebody who's having economic stress due to they have questions on their own water supply curtailment issues, I'm happy to link with Shavon and go meet with them to discuss options. It just depends upon what type of emergency we're talking about. So again, I have my email on my slide deck that I can post. You will post to your website. Feel free to email me and I would be more than happy to help.
Well, bless you, Delaney. That's a big job this year. My other question was, what does JCC, LTRG, and RVCOAD stand for, and what do they do?
Yeah, so the Jackson County Long-Term Recovery Group that was formed after the 2020 fires, and it's a really amazing organization that has since unified with the Rogue Valley community organizations active in disaster. It's led by a really great friend of mine. It's basically a volunteer group of business leads that get together. And if I say, hey, me as the county, I don't have pallets of water bottles to supply to most recently Shady Cove when they had a water crisis. And I had pictures of that event and incident response in my presentation, which I'm super proud of. I go to them to see if we can source those resources locally before I make a formal request to the state. So like I said, it's neighbors helping neighbors, it's communities helping communities. If we can source it locally to fix a problem, that's always the priority. And it also builds trust and strength within those neighborhood organizations.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear they combine forces. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's also not just Jackson County, it's also available in Josephine County. And I also hope people know that the new Jackson County Emergency Manager should be starting around July 14th. So I'm really excited to add them to the Regional Drought Force or Task Force as well.
For those of you who didn't know, Dave Daniels, the sheriff, has been filling in as the emergency manager during a transition. So good news. Thank you, Delaney. Any other questions for Delaney?
For those of you that want to get involved in the drought task force, please feel free to email me. Some of the solutions that we're looking at is more longer term drought implications and trying to come up with some creative solutions specifically are in our rural areas where we know that water supplies are very limited. Some of the ideas that have been bounced around based upon what other states have done are the dry hydrant programs, where we can install permanent hydrants on either farmer irrigation ponds or rivers or something like that, where there's more accessible water. So that way fire districts specifically can draw more safely from waters and not rely upon, pumps and drawing systems from their engines itself. The other thing that we're thinking about doing is doing more of a fixed water distribution system where we have portable water tanks installed in rural communities. This has been really successful overseas, specifically in Africa. So, for instance, our bulk water filling facility is here in White City. That's a really long drive for a lot of our communities. And a lot of communities rely upon that for their home water supply. They'll come in with water tanks and fill it. So if that goes down, there's nothing I think the Grants Pass one might be the closest facility that can meet that need. So again, if you want to be part of the solution, we know that drought is going to be potentially worse next year. Please feel free to shoot me an email and I'd be happy to invite you.
Awesome. Well, Delaney, thank you so much. Your last couple of comments are a good segue to the last part of today's time together, where we were just going to ask people, either do you have more general questions for one of the presenters, or the other one is, how are people already adapting to drought? We have some experience with drought now. And so I think much like people hearing from Shavon about, what's happening on the ground, and Delaney, what's happening on the ground, if you know folks and how they're adapting, or you all are adapting, let's hear that, because it can help us all focus on solutions and ways that we manage during these times.